Okay. Thank you to everybody for joining us tonight. As always, a thank you to Miriam Friedman for her efforts in making this program and sheer keep on going. And of course, many of you remember this Ask the Rabbi for many, many years in the shul in person. I personally think I would have said this even without the preamble of discussion, but I think it's very convenient to do it by Zoom. I think it's a better format, actually. So this is yet another benefit of the regular Ask the Rabbi program, that we have this in place and we can have this program. So thank you to Miriam for that. But we also need to thank Miriam and the extended Weiss family for sponsoring tonight's program in memory of Dr. George Weiss, Zichron Livracha. The following words are words from Miriam. Among my father's many talents was teaching his favorite and only granddaughter how to make charoset. He was not a big-time cook, but he always prepared the charoset. My parents always used to invite people who needed a seder, whether the number came from YISE for people they didn't know or others who need a place. Their home was always open, and you could be rest assured that my father made all of his guests feel comfortable, no matter what background they came from and how much they knew about Yiddishkeit. Guests were always treated to delicious food my mother would make and still does. Thank you very much to Miriam and Mrs. Weiss. I see Alan on also. Thank you to each of you for participating in the sponsorship. Just to state the obvious, if I may, on behalf of the rest of us, Miriam, I have no idea how you are at teaching people how to make charoses, but everything else you said, I think we can be confident to say the apple, maybe the charoses apple, I don't know, hasn't fallen far from the tree. And clearly the chesed that you do in so many ways within the community, and the beautiful home that so many of us admire that you and Steve have built is clearly an expression of the beautiful home that your mother, Tibaru L'chaim, and your father, Zichron Livracha, have built, and it's beautiful to see that tree continuing to flourish. So thank you for including us in honoring his memory. I believe you said this was his 6th yortzeit, if I'm not mistaken, and it should be a schus for his neshama. Thank you very much. I just want to share a very brief thought before we get into details. I was teaching a class this afternoon, and a young lady raised her hand and said, or asked, why should it be that chametz and matzah is the big deal about Pesach? Pesach is a celebration of our liberation from Egypt. There was time for the matzah to rise. There wasn't time for the matzah to rise. Why is this so central? It's a very basic question. It's a very central question to Pesach. And you could give many answers. I shared one idea, I think it's from the Abarbanel, that, when the Jews were in Egypt, they were constantly running from one thing to another, to another, to another, and it was all by the dictates of their Egyptian masters. And now the idea that the Jews have been liberated from that, but it's not that the Jews are liberated to just relax. The Jews are liberated to also run from one thing to another. But if a person lives an elevated Jewish life, every moment can be connecting one to God and fulfilling God's will in this world. And so matzah that is only kosher if it's made, you're not wasting a moment, that could be argued that it's representative of the concept that we're really just trying to maximize our lives in the service of God, and how fortunate we are to shift from maximizing our lives in the service of an Egyptian taskmaster to maximizing our lives in the service of God. So the young lady raised her hand afterwards. I thought I'd given a pretty decent answer. And the young lady said, that's really nice. But I was kind of doing question and answer with them. Maybe I was prepping for tonight. I don't know. I was kind of doing question and answer with them about laws of Pesach. And she sort of asked, that's very nice, but what does this have to do with all these details that we're talking about? This does have chametz, it doesn't have chametz. Like, can't I connect to the mitzvos and the message of Pesach, regardless of whether my hand cream has chametz or not? And it was a fair question. And I said to her, I think our sweating the details is our way of expressing to God and to ourselves how much we embrace living under God's edicts. And so if Pesach is about leaving the servitude of Egypt to become elevated to devoting our lives to God, this holiday, which I think more than any other holiday, is so much about details. Can't think of another holiday that's more detail-oriented than Pesach. It's a little stressful sometimes, and it's a little frustrating, and hopefully people will learn things tonight that will de-stress them, I hope. But in terms of the work, I think a perspective is to just think to ourselves a little bit, this is our way of really reminding ourselves and Hashem of how fortunate we are and how fortunate we feel to be his people. So I think it's something to think about. Without further ado, I broke up. Thank you to all of the people who submitted questions. Thank you to Miriam for being a conduit for many of those questions. I kind of broke them up into categories. I hope you'll understand. I want to get through all of the submitted questions before I take any other comments, only because it might be a long night, and the people who took the time to submit questions, I'd like them to at least get their questions answered, and then they can decide if they want to stay on further or not. Okay. Question number 1. May fresh salmon be bought from the giant for Pesach? Okay, that's a very good question. I want to take half a step back for this. Let's go half a step back. May fresh salmon be bought from the giant year-round? So to that question, I would say certainly, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about this. There are 2 concerns when one buys salmon year-round from a place that's not under kosher certification. The first concern is a basic halacha concern anytime a person buys fish that's not under certification, and that is, how do I know it's kosher fish? How do I know it's kosher fish? So the basic model in halacha is the way I know it's kosher fish is I make sure that I can see the fins and scales. Having them tell me it's tilapia or tuna or whatever it is does not suffice. Not unless it's a Jew who keeps laws of kosher that I can rely on. If it's just a nice person behind the counter, that doesn't suffice. So I have to be able to ascertain for myself that it's a kosher species of fish. Now, salmon is a very unique exception to that rule. Not everyone agrees to this, but this is a widely held leniency when it comes to salmon, and that is that the color of salmon is unique. So even if the skin is off of the salmon and I can no longer see the fins and scales on the salmon, no other fish has that color, has that shade of salmon. So that's why I'm allowed to buy salmon year-round from a place that's not under certification. But there's another concern year-round when I buy salmon, which is that I just have no idea when, so they cut the salmon. There's a fillet that I'm getting of the salmon, right? We're talking about that it's just fresh salmon and there's not additives or anything or spices. It's just fish, nothing more than that. But the concern is that the knife that was used to cut the salmon might have been used 5 minutes before to cut a non-kosher fish. So how do I deal with that? So I'm sure many people here have heard this many times from Rabbi that what he used to recommend to people was that you would buy that salmon, and I just want to mute everybody. You would buy that salmon and you would run it under cold water under the sink and kind of vigorously rub it against the surface of the cut. So it's you're running the surface of the cut of the fish, of where it was cut with the knife, under running cold water, and you're vigorously rubbing it as you're doing it. And that would eliminate whatever residue from non-kosher fish might exist on the salmon. Now, that's something you should do any day of the year. The question is a very wise question. How do we play it for Pesach? So I would say that a person may buy salmon and deal with it the same way for Pesach, but you could imagine we're so careful about any other foods getting involved with chametz and Pesach. We're even more careful about that for chametz and Pesach than for other things. So my recommendation would be that it should specifically be bought before Pesach. I would recommend it be bought before Pesach. I do think ideally the surface should be washed. If there is a sink that you're not using for Pesach food and dishes and the like, I think it would be ideal to wash it in that sink. I would definitely wash it before Pesach. If you don't have any other sink to use, I would say you may use your Pesach sink, but I would urge you to not have any other food or dishes in the sink at the time. And if you do it, I would kind of just wash the bottom of the sink with cold water after you're done. But I repeat, I would do all of this before Pesach. There's a lot of questions that I don't remember year to year, but I commend Miriam for flagging, or maybe someone else flagged it. I don't have it clearly in my notes now. But what about the Costco frozen salmon pieces that have an OU on the bag? Okay, so this is a common question. May one buy the Costco salmon, the Kirkland salmon for Pesach? So if it has an OUP, of course you can. So I'm reading now from the OU's guide, and it says that skin on boneless wild sockeye salmon portions, that's one. Skinless, boneless farmed Atlantic salmon portions, that's two. And tilapia loins, three. All of them may be purchased, even if it just has an OU without an OUP. This is assuming that the portions are not spiced, seasoned, or smoked. Okay, so we had one question about fresh salmon, and that we said I would say if you're buying it from a place that's not under Pesach certification, you should really buy it and wash it before Pesach. And then we went through some of the Kirkland products, very specific, and it's really these specific ones that may be used on Pesach with an OU, even though it doesn't have an OUP. Okay. Next question submitted. The person buys packages of pre-washed and cut fresh broccoli, kale, etc. They're not assuming that it's bug-free, but they then take that and check it for bugs. So they want to know if they can do that. They want to know if they can do that before, may they use those vegetables that they'll check for bugs and treat in their own way and check for bugs, but it's not coming with a kosher certification. May they use those vegetables on Pesach? So my recommendation for that would be that they may be used as long as, I just want to show you something for a moment. I want to thank Menashe. We have so many things to thank Menashe for, but one of the things is he took the trouble of putting together my random collection of links, and he put it into such a nice PDF that was sent out today. I show this many times, but I just want to highlight this again. This is a wonderful 4-page document from the CRC. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I guess it would be nice to share what I'm looking at. Sorry about that. This is a wonderful 4-page document from the CRC. It's really very good, and it's alphabetized. What's the story? May you use it for Pesach? May you not use it for Pesach? So if you look here, it says that bag salads, if you're sure that there's no kitnios, you just have to make sure that there's no sensitive additives. So my impression from the question that was submitted was it's just, broccoli, kale, whatever it is, but you just have to make sure there's not sensitive additives. If there would be sensitive additives, I would discourage you from using it on Pesach. If there's not sensitive additives, I would recommend you buy it before Pesach, as the CRC suggests. If you buy it before Pesach, I would say you could treat it on Chol HaMoed. I would say that would be all right. I would recommend a basic washing off, if at all possible, to wash it off into a sink that's that you don't have Pesach food and dishes in and stuff like that. I certainly wouldn't put it in the sink. You just kind of hold it in the sink if at all possible. If not, I think it's fine to wash off again, assuming there's not additives. Sensitive additives, I think it's fine to wash off in a Pesach sink, but I would urge you not to have anything else in the sink at the time. And I do think it makes sense to kind of clean the bottom of the sink afterwards. Okay, I hope that made sense. Okay, the next question is okay, the next question has to do with decaf coffee and decaf tea. Okay, so let me just, those things do need to have a Passover certification. Okay, so the Folgers decaf, Folgers instant, it does not require an OUP. Folgers instant decaf is all right. That seems to be the big decaf coffee that's okay. And it seems that, let me just check one more thing. I'm sorry. It seems that tea is really, I don't see a decaffeinated option for tea. But
there is Bigelow. I picked up some Bigelow today.
Okay.
Bigelow decaf tea bags with a Huff KP.
Thank you, Menashe. Thanks a lot. Okay, but Folgers are okay. Decaf, just regular decaf with an OU without an OUP. And thank you, Menashe, for mentioning Bigelow, but it seems that should have a Pesach certification on it. Thank you. Okay. Baby bottles that had rice cereal in them. So let's just let's take a half step back. We know with no offense to our Sephardic brethren, I don't know if any of them are on, but we know that Ashkenazim don't have kitnios on Pesach, but we also know that if an Ashkenazi, let's say, was sick or had unique nutritional needs, we are lenient about them having kitnios. So certainly food for young children, we're certainly lenient about giving them kitnios. I should mention that one should make sure not all kitnios are equal. There are kitnios that have actual chametz problems in the processing and the like. So even if you're getting kitnios, you need to make sure that the kitnios don't have a chametz problem. One of the pages submitted, I just want to jump back to show people what I'm talking about. One of the pages that I put in this packet that we sent out today, it's near the end of it. It's a list from the CRC based on data from the OU. This is what I'm going through right now. And it's various products that are acceptable in a situation of need, such as to provide nutrition for a baby. But with all those things, one has to keep in mind that one should be keeping those kitnios away from the regular Pesach dishes. So if you have kitnios for babies, young children, so you should be washing the bottles in another sink, not in the sink that you wash your kitnios dishes. What you would do is you would wash it with cold water, just in the sink, just kind of hold it in the sink, and that's how you would handle that. Okay. There's a question submitted about kids chewable Claritin. Let me give context for that question. Hope you don't mind that I keep on jumping back and forth with this document. Very important letter. You've been seeing this for years, long before my tenure. This is this letter from the CRC. The CRC gives very interesting guidelines as to what types of medications you need to make sure don't have chametz in them, and what kind of medications you don't need to be so sure don't have chametz in them. I don't want to take the time to read through this letter now, but I would encourage you to consult it. Obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. One of the things that the CRC says is an issue is chewable medications. And so, heaven forbid, if something's life and death, that obviously is a different story. But if it's regular chewable medications to make things a little bit easier for a child, we would be particular that it shouldn't have chametz ingredients in it. Unfortunately, the list that I saw says that chewable Claritin for kids is a problem this year. I'm sorry to say. If anyone wants to submit in the text, I'm not going to, in the chat box, I'm not going to do it now. I'm happy if anyone wants to suggest other products. I'm happy to look them up when we go through the chats at the end. Okay. Which toothpastes are okay for Pesach this year? So we're going to go back to this. We have a document here also. These are really neat. Sorry, I skipped it. These are really neat. It's from the Star K. Now, the Star K comes out with a very extensive list of products. Now, I need to tell you two things. First of all, for the Star K list of products, you have to pay money. In other words, that they have a joint thing with the Cola in Los Angeles. It's very detailed. It's very extensive. You can buy it online. I don't know if there's any place local that's selling them or not. I'm just not sure. But what they do is this is online. This was copied from online. This is just like a quick reference list so that they're kind enough to put out. So if you look over here under toothpaste, it has Colgate. If you see, it says all kinds of Colgate are all right. Now, I need to tell you something when you look at this list, which is very convenient. Those who are consulting my halachic opinion, the CRC letter is at odds with various things on these 2 pages from the Star K. Okay? There are various things that the CRC says don't have to be kosher l'Pesach. And the Star K, oh, I see, excuse me, I see you had chatted it anyway, Menashe, but by the way, regarding the children's allergy medication, Benadryl allergy plus congestion chewable tablets, the Star K says is okay. I think you put that in, Menashe, already. Thank you. But in any event, if you're asking my opinion, I would go with the CRC over the Star K in terms of what needs to be Pesach certified in the first place. But for things that need to be Pesach certified, Star K has a wonderful list here of various things. If anybody wants to know why I'm going with the CRC over the Star K, it's because the CRC wouldn't tell me that I have an accent. Moving on. That was just a joke, but I would say we could be lenient like that. Okay. Totally switching gears now. Do I need to clean strollers that I won't use on Pesach? That's a really interesting question. Let me I'm probably projecting here to a certain extent. There is enough raw materials and food to sustain 3 third world countries in the bottom of various Rosenbaum family strollers. Okay, there's all kinds of food in there. I think we left Shalach Maras. I'm just kidding. But at least thinking of my strollers, I could not imagine not cleaning the bottom of my strollers. There's no way I don't have chametz in my strollers. Having said that, if I took one look at my stroller and I didn't want to deal with it, I could put my stroller in a place that I wasn't going to use it over Pesach, set aside, and include it with the things that I'm selling. You know, I could do that. But if I don't have space for that, or, if I want to if I don't have space for that, I should definitely be cleaning out the bottom of my stroller before Pesach. Now, if you have a spotless stroller and you think it's very unlikely there's any food down there, I'm very jealous of you, and you wouldn't need to clean it out. But assuming most of us, I think there's a lot of stuff on the bottom of strollers. That's what I would say. Next question: if kids use old food containers in a play kitchen and as containers to keep things in, do these containers need to be put away? In other words, they're using old food containers. The questioner said that the food containers have been washed out before given to the kids. Okay, so I mean, you're not cooking food with them on Pesach. I suppose the kids aren't either. Everything's cold and they're clean. They shouldn't have to put away. If they have food residue in them and that food residue is chametz, you should be putting it away for Pesach. But if it's clean and you're not actually, serving food in it and stuff, I think it should be fine. And even if you were serving food in it, if it's just totally, I mean, I don't know if I would serve food in at the table, but for just the kids playing around, if it's totally clean and everything is cold, it should be fine. Okay. Really interesting question submitted. May a person open a cabinet that also has cookbooks that they use all year? Okay, so I think it's very fair to assume that cookbooks have all kinds of food residue in them. I think it's very fair to assume. I'm sure not as much as the bottom of my strollers, but at least some food residue in them. So just going step by step, and the questioner is assuming this, I would not take a year-round cookbook out during Pesach. Certainly, I don't think it's a good idea. Certainly not in my kitchen, where if I'm preparing food and the like. So the question is, may I open the cabinet that has the cookbooks in it? Now, it depends a little bit on what your story is. If like every time you open your cabinet year-round, all these crumbs fly out of it, then obviously you shouldn't. If that's not the case, so theoretically you can open your cabinet. Here's the question: how are you dealing with your cookbooks? Most of us probably put our cookbooks away with the stuff that we're selling. That's my guess. If you're putting it away with the stuff that you're selling, when you sell chametz, what you're saying is you're selling the chametz to the non-Jew, and whatever the locations of the chametz, you're renting out that spot to the non-Jew over Pesach. So if you have in mind that whatever shelf of your cabinet, or what your cabinet in general, is being sold to the, the chametz is being sold to the non-Jew, so then probably the cabinet should be off limits. If you say, no, I don't, it could be that you don't need to sell your cookbooks. If you don't think there's a crazy amount of food there, I would strongly urge you not to use it during Pesach. But if you don't feel there's a ridiculous amount of food in the pages of your cookbooks, you probably don't have to sell them, in which case it should be fine to open the cabinet as long as you're confident that crumbs won't start flying out of your cabinet. I hope that was clear. Okay, really interesting question. A person has chametz plates that they like to put on display in their buffet year-round. They have to have chametz stick plates that they like to put on display. They have to put those plates away. So there's two issues here. One issue is, is there chametz in the plate? So, well, there's two ways that there could be chametz in the plate. One is if you didn't clean your plate well in the first place. If that's the case, my guess is you don't put your plate on display year-round if it wasn't cleaned well. So I don't think that's the scenario. So there's a question, if there's like chametz like absorbed within the plate, is that a chametz issue? So we normally hold it's not a chametz issue. But there's a separate issue. I'm not allowed to use those plates over Pesach. I'm not allowed to use those plates over Pesach because they're chametz stick plates. I'm not allowed to use them with hot food, etc. So it would be correct to put the plates in a place that I'm not going to come to use them. It would be correct to do that. So if I never use them year-round, if it's just on artistic display, then I don't see a problem. But if it's like I have it on display in my buffet and sometimes I take it out of my buffet to use it, then I would recommend against it being on display, not because people aren't allowed to see your chametz stick plate, but more because I would be concerned that a person would forget themselves and pull out the plate for use. Hope that was clear. Okay, moving on to the Seder. If one doesn't like wine, may that person drink only grape juice? It's an interesting question. So in halacha, it's certainly encouraged for a person to drink wine at the Seder. It's certainly encouraged for a person to drink wine at the Seder. It's not encouraged for a person to make themselves sick at the Seder. So there are many people who, if they drink wine, they'll get nauseous. It'll be very difficult for them. It could be that a person has certain reactions when they drink wine. In any of those cases, a person should not be drinking wine. If a person is okay drinking wine and they're going to be fine, and they just happen to prefer grape juice to wine, to be honest with you, it would be appropriate to drink wine at the Seder. I'm not talking about underage, I'm not talking about that, but an adult, it would be appropriate to drink wine at the Seder. If a person feels that they'll get disgusted or sick or whatever it is, it's okay to drink grape juice. It would still be beneficial to put a little bit of wine into the grape juice. Again, unless a person feels that they'll get disgusted by that or they'll have some physical reaction to that. I hope that was a clear answer. Okay, may one roast chicken for the starter. May one roast chicken for the Seder. It's a very interesting thing. Of course, we know the Korban Pesach, which we don't bring today, because we're not set in Yerushalayim. We're not, as a nation, established in Yerushalayim. We don't bring the Korban Pesach today. The Korban Pesach was roasted. There's a halacha that you're not allowed to eat things that would be confused with the roast of Korban Pesach, because we don't want people to get confused about this. Common practice in Klal Yisrael, like Shulchan Aruch territory, is that any type of a meat or poultry, we don't eat roasted Seder night. Now, what's the definition of roasted? So what I would say is that meat or poultry that has liquid, not its own gravy, but liquid from an external source, that there should be liquid in the pan throughout the cooking process. So, and that's the type of liquid sauce, that's the type of that would be a recommendation for a meat or poultry that one serves at the Seder. Okay, if I can't be at the table for the entire Seder, what are the most important parts that I shouldn't miss? So I just have to give you the backdrop on this. Part of what Miriam does is Miriam asks me to come up with some questions to sort of give people things to think about. And those are the questions on the flyer. Sometimes Miriam suggests questions, sometimes I suggest questions. But then Miriam does something which really takes a lot of audacity. When she makes sure I get the submitted question, she says, by the way, you have to answer the questions you put on the flyer. So I thought it was a great question. I don't know what the answer is. Okay, I'm just kidding. So what I would say are the core parts of the Seder. First of all of the eating and drinking components of the Seder are certainly core to the Seder. Certainly the 4 cups. Certainly the different things with matzah and maror, that's essential. I should mention, by the way, that in halacha, the 4 cups are supposed to come in the order of the Seder. In other words, I can't just, if I was away from the table for a while, I can't just drink 3 cups of wine or grape juice or whatever really fast and now I'm in, everybody. It has to follow the order. What I would say are the core components of the speaking parts of the Seder, I would say, are the Manashtana, Avarim Hayinu. That's the Manashtana cited in the Mishnah. Avarim Hayinu is the basic answer to the Manashtana. And then after that, I would say the next most important part is Rabbi Gamliel. I hope I'm not mixing up the name. Rabbi Gamliel says, someone who doesn't say these 3 things at the Seder, lo yatsi yedei chovaso, hasn't fulfilled his obligation. Pesach, matzah, maror, that's near the end of Magid. So, Manashtana, Avarim Hayinu, those 3 things, but again, to do the accompanying paragraphs for each of the things, and all of the Hallel. All of the Hallel, and of course, benching and the after bracha. I don't mean any of this to take away from the importance of all the rest of the Seder, which is beautiful and important. But if a person really wasn't up to doing everything at the Seder, that's what I would say would be the core. What happens if a person gets up from the table to check on food or to deal with something with the kids, whatever it is? So what happens? Is a person supposed to repeat everything they've missed? I would encourage one to repeat everything they've missed. Again, we're all in different, if it's not possible, I just gave you some, suggested guidance. But if it is possible, I would say it'd be appropriate, even if in order to catch up, a person says it in English. I think that's fine, if that's the way a person will catch up. But I think the Seder is not got a special, and I would recommend that's what you do. Okay, this is a really interesting question. In a family with multiple minhagim, who do you follow? The answer is very simple. Follow what I say. No, that was a joke. But I think it's most appropriate that the person who's the head of the Seder, presumably the head of the Seder, is either the head of household that the Seder is being held in. It could be in some families, an elder relative is sort of, though it's not in his home, sort of asked to run the Seder. I think whoever is running the Seder, that's the person whose minhagim should be followed. Obviously, Sephardi, Ashkenazi, eating kitnios, not eating kitnios. I don't mean that. I mean, people should keep their practices in terms of that, but in terms of how to do it at the Seder and this and that, I think it's appropriate to figure out who the head of the Seder is, and I think it's derech eretz to follow that person's minhagim. I've shared this story many times in shul, but I've got to share this story. Our second Pesach of married, and Matara and I, we went to my in-laws for the first days of Pesach. It turned out to be the only time we went to them for the start, because by year 3 we already were in Bethesda, and my poor wife was already making Pesach at the age of 23. But in any event, I said to my wife after the Starim, I said, your father runs very nice Starim, but he does a lot of unique things that aren't commonly done. It's very nice, but just an observation. There's a lot of things that aren't commonly done. So my wonderful wife doesn't take garbage from anybody, and certainly not from me. So my wife looked at me in the eye and said, out of curiosity, how many people's Starim have you ever been at? And I paused for a moment. I said, my father and his father's. She said, so how exactly do you know what minhagim are common and what minhagim aren't? So I said, that was a good point. As a token for that, I publicly tell that story many times. Okay, so that's that. We're almost finished in terms of the submitted questions. This is a very common question. May I use the same hot water heater on Pesach that I use all year round? A number of the kashrus organizations have become relatively lenient about this question, with the following proviso, and I want to be very, very clear about this. This is assuming that a person only has water in their urn. In other words, if a person puts coffee in their urn, soup in their urn, hot cocoa in their urn, we're not talking about that. But if all a person ever puts in their urn is water, and they also don't clean the inside of the urn with maybe a chametz stick sponge or vinegar or whatever it is, things that could be chametz stick. If they only use water and they don't clean it with chametz stick materials or vessels, I would tell you, you should make sure the outside of the urn is clean. You should certainly make sure that the spigot is clean. But if so, I would tell you can use it on Pesach. One more caveat. Some people warm food on top of their urns. I don't know if you've ever seen that on Shabbos. If you do that, I would also discourage you from using your urn on Pesach, because basically the top of your urn has been exposed to all this nice hot chametz. But if you don't use your urn to warm stuff up like food and stuff from the outside, and you only put water in and you don't clean it in a chametz stick way, I would say you can just make sure the urn is clean and go ahead. There are people who are strict about that. If you're strict, you're not a meshugana. But I would say it's okay. As a general rule, I would say, at least for Ashkenazim, our practice would be not to kasher glass or Pyrex for Pesach. The notable exception would be glasses, that you use just for cold. That's this famous thing. I'm sure some of you have this recollection of filling the bathtub, with the glasses and etc. But dishes that are used for hot, glass or Pyrex dishes that are used for hot, whether it be in eating or food preparation, I would discourage you from using from kashering them for Pesach. Metal is the most common thing that's kasher for Pesach. I want to be clear, when we kasher things for Pesach, metal, part of the kashering process, if you're using the boiling water, is you need to make sure that the item is completely clean. That's one thing. But the other thing is you have to make sure that in order to make sure it's completely clean, there have to be no unreachable spots. So there are a number of utensils and the like that have ridges and decorative things that might be complicated. I also want to make sure everybody knows, because people ask about this every now and then, that when one kashers things with hagala, with boiling water, one needs to immerse all of it within the pot of boiling water. It has to be immersed in the pot in which the water was boiled. You can't start pouring water out. That doesn't work for dishes and the like, vessels. But the other thing I want to note is when it comes to kashering, not toveling, but kashering, as long as the entirety of the vessel gets in at one point or another, it doesn't have to all be in at the same time. So if you think of like a large plate or something, you can kind of like rotate it, through the pot of boiling water. I hope that made sense. Person submitted a question. They self-cleaned their oven before Pesach last year. They didn't end up using the oven during the year. Do they need to self-clean it again? I do not think they need to self-clean it again if they haven't used it since they self-cleaned it for Pesach. If a person did use the stove on top of it, I do not think that impacts them using the oven one way or the other. I would say they should, kasher the stove whenever they kasher the stove, but I don't think that impacts the halachic status of the oven. Thank you for sharing that question. Is there a communal hagalas kalim? Is there communal kalim kashering? I'm not aware of one. If anyone is aware of one, you're welcome to submit it in the chat. And then also, what happens if a person forgot to prepare an Erev Tavshilin? Good reminder, first days of Pesach this year, you need an Erev Tavshilin. So that means you set aside the Erev Tavshilin. Of course, that's a baked item and a cooked item. So that would be a matzah. If you try to use a roll for Erev Tavshilin this year, you are not appropriately prepared for Pesach. So focus a little less on Erev Tavshilin, a little bit more on the laws of Pesach. But you could use a matzah. Many people take, let's say, a piece of gefilte fish, hard-boiled egg. You set it aside before Yom Tov begins. Just as an aside, a lot of people get confused by this. The Erev Tavshilin allows you to prepare on Thursday night or Friday for Shabbos. The Erev Tavshilin does not allow you to prepare on the first day of Yom Tov. When it's Thursday, Friday, Yom Tov, the Erev Tavshilin only allows you to prepare on Thursday night / Friday for Shabbos. It's essential that the Erev Tavshilin still be existent in order to do preparations. So set aside that Erev Tavshilin. There's a text that you say from the siddur, but then make sure it stays in a nice, safe place. If a person forgot to do the Erev Tavshilin, there's a really neat thing. It's relevant this year. You could do your Erev Tavshilin on Thursday too. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to do your Erev Tavshilin before Yom Tov begins, sometime on Wednesday daytime. But if you forgot, you could do your Erev Tavshilin on Thursday day, and they have what they call a maman of shach, like this way, then that way, then this. And that is as follows. We know that the whole concept of keeping 2 days Yom Tov it's to retain the practice of it if people aren't sure about the days. So you say as follows. If Thursday today is really the first day of Pesach, then tomorrow's not Yom Tov, tomorrow's Chol HaMoed. I don't need an Erev Tavshilin. And if tomorrow is the first day of Pesach, if Friday is the first day of Pesach, then this is my Erev Tavshilin today because it's Erev Yom Tov. So that's what you do. That only works if you're doing the Erev Tavshilin on Thursday daytime, Wednesday night or Thursday daytime. That's the only way that works. If you realize Thursday night or Friday that you forgot to do an Erev Tavshilin, then at that point, hopefully the rabbi will have remembered his Erev Tavshilin. Hopefully there are few motivations I have in life like remembering an Erev Tavshilin, because it's very embarrassing if everybody and their brother asks you if you did it, and you have to say no. So hopefully I'll remember, in which case, as long as you weren't being flippant about the Erev Tavshilin, generally we say you could rely on the one the rabbi did for the community, but you are not allowed to rely on it as plan A. Everyone needs to do their own Erev Tavshilin. That's the halacha. The Gemara talks about it. So much so that if this is the second Erev Tavshilin in a row that a person missed, it could be they're not even allowed to be connected to the communal Erev Tavshilin. By the way, just as an aside, this thing that you could do the Erev Tavshilin on Thursday with like this condition does not work for Rosh Hashanah. If Rosh Hashanah was Thursday, Friday, you're not allowed to make that condition because Rosh Hashanah is different than the other Yom Tov because it's considered like one long day. Okay, thank you, all the people who submitted questions. And again, Miriam, for really such a wide-ranging discussion. I see there's a number of things in the chat. I'm going to begin to go down. Okay, Sarah, great question. This is my humble admission. I have no idea what sensitive additives are, but that's what the CRC said in their thing. This was back to think about, bagged salads. The CRC said if kosher Pesach marked is not available, you can get it. You should buy it before Pesach as long as it doesn't have sensitive additives. If anyone who's wiser and more knowledgeable than I have a sense of what sensitive additives mean, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat. Thank you for asking the question, Sarah, that I was too embarrassed to admit that. I'm sure I'm not the only one here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Menashe, for that information about Bigelow. Thank you, Mindy, for that information about Wazatsky. Thank you, right. I think I got that, Menashe. Thank you. The question is, I had mentioned a pregnant woman. I had mentioned that ideally a person should drink wine at the Seder. If a person isn't going to feel well, if it's going to make a person sick, they can drink grape juice. If it's possible to add a little bit of wine, that's good. The question is, should a pregnant woman be adding wine to her grapes for the 4 cups? I don't have a handle on if it makes a big deal or not. To just have a little, I think many women put like a drop of wine in that situation, but I can't take medical responsibility. If that sounds worrisome to you, don't do it. But I think many women put a drop of wine in when they're pregnant, but that's not medical advice. And if you're unsure, just do grape juice. Okay, Ariel, that sounds interesting. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay, this is a great question, and I appreciate the person who submitted it. This is a very common question, and the question is as follows. If somebody has a live-in aide, let's say the live-in aide is not Jewish, they have their own food, they do their own thing, they eat chametz. How is this person supposed to handle that? Is that okay? Is that not okay? It's a very important question. So here's the halacha. The halacha is, I'm not allowed to have chametz owned by me or that I'm responsible for. Okay, now, if you're bringing chametz into my house and I'm responsible for it, that's a problem. Okay? But if a non-Jew brings chametz into my house and I have zero responsibility for the chametz, and I tell the non-Jew, listen, this is not my problem, this is not my department, you're welcome, that's your room, you do your thing, it's not my job to make sure your chametz stays intact, but then that's fine. And by the way, we all do that. I don't know if all of us do that, but almost all of us do that. You know why? That's what happens when we're selling chametz. We're selling chametz to the non-Jew. We're telling the non-Jew, by the way, that's why when we sell chametz, we're also renting the location of the chametz, because it's supposed to be that I have nothing to do with this. So if I have a freezer that's full of chametz, so I'm selling the chametz in the freezer to the non-Jew, I should tape it shut as a reminder to myself that I don't want to have anything to do with the contents of that freezer. But also, the way for me to really detach from the freezer, and this is brought down in halacha, is I'm supposed to say, you know what, the freezer is being rented out to the non-Jew. Now, if I'm only selling a few shelves there's only chametz on a few shelves, and the bottom shelves I want to use it for Pesach, so fine. So I'm renting out the top shelves of the freezer to the non-Jew. I should mark it very clearly so I don't make a mistake. But if the non-Jew is doing their own thing, their own part of the house, it's not my problem. It's really not my problem. But I need to be sure that their food is not coming anywhere near where I and the residents of my household are eating food. It's even if it's at different times, because just think about it. I spent all this time cleaning my house for Pesach, and now, like, on my dining table, there's someone sitting there eating a tuna fish sandwich with bread. I mean, that can't be. But that's a separate issue. But in terms of ownership of chametz, it's not my department. What is a little bit more complicated, not a lot more complicated, a little more complicated, is if the person would be a Jew. That's a little bit more complicated. And that, if anyone has that issue, I'd encourage you to discuss it with me offline. But thank you for raising that question. Yeah, Menashe, I think I mentioned the thing that you put in. If you feel I didn't, the thing about the urn, if you feel I didn't say it, just tell me so. But I think I said it.
I think just to clarify for people, because they might not really think about it. So often people use vinegar to clean their urn. And actually,
Right.
I think there's some of these where it's like a powder, but it's essentially like a citric acid or something like that. So any of these things that you use, if you use anything other than just plain soap and water to clean the urn, you need to check it out.
Thank you very much, Menashe. Yeah, thank you. I meant to say that, but maybe I didn't say it. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it very much. And I also want to reiterate that if a person cleans their urn, even if it's just soap and water, but with a sponge that has a lot of chametz on it and stuff, I would also say that's an issue. Thank you so much. I suppose, Menashe, that next, is this the sensitive additives?
Yeah, I remember from past BHA, BHT, citric acid. I looked up actually another place, ascorbic or ascorbic acid. There are a number of these things. They're listed in the various Passover guides.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure you were listening, Menashe. Thanks a lot. Okay. And thank you, Sarah, for raising the point. That was back to Sarah's question about the additives. Yeah, I would think physician ordered nasal sinus rinse is not, to the best of my knowledge, I would say not to worry about that. Thank you, Mindy. So I tell you that a vegetable wash doesn't have to be kosher for Pesach. I don't think a vegetable wash has to be kosher for Pesach. I wanna check real fast if the CRC thing talks about it. I don't think it has to be kosher for Pesach, but I just want to check real fast. Oh, I stand corrected. It says, the CRC says a vegetable wash should be kosher for Pesach. Okay. Excuse me. Glad I checked. Sorry about that. Okay. I don't know if there's anyone certified for Pesach. Okay. Kosher. Okay. Prenatal vitamin.
Kosher Quest lists specifically Serally, Sereli. Don't know if that's available around here though.
Thank you. I'm curious for a second if somebody, if Menashe or somebody else, I don't want to keep everybody waiting. If somebody has access to the OU guide, I have it here. I just don't want to. I'm curious if they say that a vegetable wash needs to be kosher Pesach or not. My guess is they say it doesn't, but I'm curious if anybody.
I'll see if I can check. Kosher Quest, Rabbi Eilert says that it does. Same as
does. He also says it. I'm curious if the OU says it, if you don't mind. Okay. So here's the story. There was a question submitted about prenatal vitamins. I personally am not aware of any prenatal vitamins that are listed as kosher Pesach. It could be there is one. If someone is aware of one, you're welcome to submit it. But I wouldn't say this for vitamins in general. If you look at the CRC letter, it says for vitamins in general, discuss with your rabbi how important it is if it's not kosher Pesach. But in terms of prenatal vitamins, if a woman is pregnant, in terms of prenatal vitamins, as long as it's in pill form and it's not, flavored, I would say that it's fine for Pesach. I would say as long as it's in pill form that you swallow, it's not flavored. Okay. I would say it's fine.
OU does reference it in the section on checking for bugs. It has a 3 asterisks next to saying you use wash in soap or in vegetable wash, and 3 asterisks that says special certification necessary for Passover use.
Okay, okay. I learned something tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Not okay, it. OU.
Very well. Thank you very much. I would say that I want to just check this very quickly. I made one mistake already tonight. I don't want to make 2, but my guess is, hold on one second. Yeah, I would think a bath additive and Epsom salt, to deal with eczema and the like, I think would really, really be fine. I would say it should be fine. Thank you for that question. Okay. Great question. I appreciate your asking. The question is submitted as follows. Back to the urn. Let's say a person only ever puts water in their urn. They don't use vinegar. They don't this, they don't that. But the water is poured from the urn into a cup of oatmeal regularly. So that's the reason that there are people who would be strict and say that they want to have an urn, a Pesach urn that they don't use during the year. But I would say, and this is really what the organizations are saying, that's not essential. So the person who put in the question about oatmeal, that you hit the nail on the head for the reason why a person would be strict about it. But again, what the organizations are really saying is if that's the only chametz context, you don't have to worry about it. Okay. Okay, somebody submitted a question. I need you either call out or put a follow-up chat, please. The question is, how do you keep food at school that is chametz? I'm a little bit unclear as to what the questioner is asking. I would, Elaine, as long as it's not in that form, I would really say it's okay. That's what I would say. Let me just come back to this one more time. Sorry. I would really say it's okay. Yeah, that's what I would say. Okay, let me just get back to. I see no issues with home COVID tests on Pesach. Thank you for asking that. I'll double check real fast about. Let me just double check real fast. Sorry to keep on shifting back and forth on you all. I mean, I really think it's fine, but let me just. Yeah, hand sanitizer is fine. Hand sanitizer is fine for Pesach. Okay, the person who just asked me the question about vitamins, let's talk about that offline. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Rivka? You're muted.
I'm sorry, I'm still at work, so I didn't
It's
want.
fine.
The 7th generation dishwashing gel that we use to wash the vegetables. It's not. It's designed to be used in dishwashers, but it's great for washing vegetables. It's not a vegetable wash.
I think the deal, I think the issue that I'm standing corrected on is the fact that it's coming in direct contact with the food. I think that's why they're being more machmir.
Yeah.
So I would say it needs to be,
Seventh generation is as a dishwasher detergent is on the OU's, does not require certification for Passover list.
Yay! Thank you.
Oh, I see what the rabbi is saying.
I don't know.
That might be.
I don't know. I would submit the
hear what
question
you're
to the
saying.
OU. I don't know.
I apologize. The rabbi's raising there may be a secondary issue that would be more machmir in this situation.
That's what I think is going on. You're welcome to submit the question to the OU. Maybe they know something about it, but about that specific product. But thank you. Okay, Rivka, if you could, thank you. Okay, there's some more questions that have come in. Okay, the question is, if a table that isn't going to be used for food, does it need to be covered for Pesach? So presumably the surface of the table is clean. Presumably there's not breadcrumbs, lying across the table, in which case the table doesn't need to be covered. We're very strict about covering tables because we don't want any, whether it be hot, cold, we don't want any chametz residue or chametz absorption coming into our food, because we're very strict about eating on Pesach. If you're not going to use it for eating, I wouldn't worry about it. I would just make sure it's clean. There are certainly minimum requirements for maror. There are certainly minimum requirements for maror. I don't have it offhand. We could discuss that offline if you like. Charoses is just putting a little bit of charoses on. No minimum requirements for charoses. Yeah. Any other comments? Any other comments? If anyone wants to say anything, well, no, not anything. But if anyone has any questions that they would like to share.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I have a question. So I plan on being in Israel for Pesach. So when it comes to Mechirat Chametz, is there any requirement to sell it earlier than usual?
Okay, great question, Eli. Thank you very much. So here's the issue. So the issue is, if you sell chametz with me, okay, so I sell my chametz, Mitzvah Shem, the chametz is being sold around 11:30ish, let's say, Erev Pesach. Now, that's like 20 minutes before the deadline. The problem is, when it's 11:30 here, Erev Pesach, it's way past the deadline for you if you're in Israel. So this shaila is dealt with by poskim. So the generally encouraged approach is that your chametz should be sold at a time that is still permissible for you to be owning chametz. Are you with me so far, Eli? So that being the case, I normally, when I make arrangements for the sale of chametz, I normally tell people, if you're going overseas, I do another sale the day before. So I, God willing, I'm going to be doing a sale of chametz on Tuesday before Pesach. So what I would encourage you to do, Eli, is I would encourage you to make arrangements with me for the sale of your chametz on Tuesday, and then you don't have any questions. You know what I mean? Now, the other side of that, though, is when I'm going to sell you chametz sometime on Tuesday. So if all the chametz you're selling is here in America, you're gone already. You already went to Israel, right? So you don't care if I sell your chametz on Tuesday or Wednesday. It doesn't make a difference to you. But if you're selling your chametz in Israel, it's probably not going to be relevant for you because you're probably staying with your family. But if you're selling chametz in Israel, just understand that if you sell it with me, it's out of your possession a little bit earlier than it has to be. Did that make sense?
So does that mean if you sell it for me on Tuesday, that means that from that point on Tuesday, 6 or 7 hours ahead, I can no longer eat chametz, or?
You can no longer eat the chametz that you sold through me.
Oh, that's not going to be a problem because all the chametz is here.
That's right.
US.
Right. That's right. I just wanted to mention that as a caveat.
All right,
Okay. Thank you.
Following
you.
up on that, would there be an issue? Let's say hypothetically let's say he was going to Israel like that, and then he was coming. Oh, actually, no. Or whatever. Somebody who's in Israel, if you're selling like that, would there also be no problem that the 8th day here, which is not Pesach there, when would the chametz reverse?
Well. So if it's a chutzniker who's keeping 2 days Yom Tiv, right? So it's not. But it would be relevant if a person in Israel was selling their chametz in Israel through me, then they can't pull their pizza out of the freezer an hour after Yom Tiv for them because I haven't bought it back yet. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
a
thank
real.
you.
So which means somebody in that situation would really need to do with somebody in Israel.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
practical purposes.
Exactly. Right.
Can I use?
Mrs.
Can
Sperling?
Can I use Zyrtec as an allergy medicine on patients?
Is it important for you? Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
It's a pill that you take, right?
The capsule.
It's a capsule. It's a capsule that you swallow, right, Mrs. Sperling?
It's a pill that I swallow, yes.
Yeah, yeah. For your if it's important for you, you can take it. Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Sperling. Thank you, Mrs. Price. Interesting question came in. If a person burns chametz early, so I don't remember offhand what the deadline is. It's something like 10:20 for burning chametz, not for owning chametz, but for burning chametz Wednesday morning, something like that, 10:30, whatever it is, 10:40. I don't remember. So let's say you want to get a head start on things. So you burn your chametz at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay, you are supposed to burn it during the daytime. You're not supposed to burn it the night before. You burn your chametz at 8 o'clock in the morning. Are the members of your household still allowed to eat the chametz? It's a really interesting question. So it's a little bit complicated because our practice is once we burn the chametz, we make this wide, far-reaching statement that any chametz that I own, I know about it, I don't know about it, it's all nothing in my eyes. So it's a little bit of a contradiction in terms to be once your chametz is burnt at 8:30, to say any chametz I have is nothing, and then you look inside your kitchen window and your dear family is eating all this chametz that you own. Like what are the words? Now, if they want to go to CVS and buy their last thing of those donuts they sell in CVS, you know what I mean? Their last hurrah, that's their business because it's their chametz. You know what I mean? But if it's your household's chametz, I think once you're burning your chametz, I think the store should be closed. That's what I would say. It's interesting. Okay, a person submitted a question about matzah shirim for diabetics. It's a very important question. I don't think I can answer it appropriately offhand. If you would please email me at your convenience. I just sent someone a document the other day from one of the organizations that I think the Stark has a nice article about it. And you could read it and just consider it and then get back to me. I don't think I could do it justice in this context, but please feel free to email me and I'll send you a link to an article. God willing, there is going to be a dumpster this year. That's the plan to the best of my knowledge. Yeah, Debbie, interesting question. So
Yeah, I could put it on chat.
How about you can try?
I'm just gonna participants, sorry. Okay. Okay, an American tourist in Israel, should they still make an Erev Tavshilin? It probably does make sense for an American in Israel to make an Erev Tavshilin. In other words, for example, we normally hold, even if for nothing else than lighting candles on Friday for Shabbos, we normally hold that's part of what is accomplished by the Erev Tavshilin. So normally, if you're someone's guest, you don't do an Erev Tavshilin because you're covered by the Erev Tavshilin, but you're right. Your Israeli hosts won't be doing an Erev Tavshilin. Yeah, I think it makes, thank you for raising that, Debbie. I think it makes sense to do an Erev Tavshilin.
If an American is in Israel and they are getting food from an Israeli who is an Israeli citizen, can the Israeli citizen make the food on Thursday for the Americans to eat over Shabbos?
I think that's fine. I mean, that's really interesting. So there are people who would probably be machmer on that. There are people who probably be machmer on that. Push comes to shove, there's definitely what to rely on that it will be okay. I mean, I think the issue. Well, hold on a second. Oh, wait. I'm getting there. Sorry. So on Thursday day or Thursday night? Thursday day?
Thursday, wait, their Yom Tov is Wednesday night till Thursday night.
Right. So when is the Israeli making the food for Shabbos?
After Thursday night.
Oh, Thursday night. Thursday night. So you're saying the American didn't do an Erev Tavshilin. That's what you're saying?
No, the American did it.
If the American did an Erev Tavshilin, then it should be fine.
Okay,
Because the American could do that. You know what I mean?
right. Yom Tov is Wednesday, Thursday for us, right?
Right. No, it's Wednesday night, Thursday night. It's Thursday,
Wednesday night.
Friday.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting question. May a person burn chametz early and say the kol chamira later? It is strongly discouraged to do that in halacha. The rabbis instituted that the bittul be said in conjunction with the burning of the chametz as a way of reminding a person to say the bittul. So, like, if a person didn't say the kol chamira, they could certainly say the kol chamira later. By the way, whenever the deadline is for owning chametz, once you pass the deadline, it's too late to say kol chamira. So if you burn your chametz earlier, you could say kol chamira later, but you're not supposed to plan to say the kol chamira later. Hope that made sense. Anything else? Okay, wishing everybody a Chag Kosher v'Sameach. I just want to let everybody know, Amir Shem, there'll be in this week's Shabbos Shorts various days and times that I'm available for the sale of chametz. I want to emphasize that it's not only tied to minyanim. There are times in the middle of the day, there are times at night having nothing to do with minyanim that I'm also making myself available for the sale of chametz. If the days and times don't work, or if it's difficult for a person to get around, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to make separate arrangements with you. Thank you again to Miriam, and again, it should be a schus for your father's neshama, and thank you to the entire Weiss family. It's just me doing Mechira, Rabbi. Yeah, thank you. And
Rabbi?
Wishing everybody a Chag Kosher v'Sameach. Izzy?
Yes. When you answered that question before, that you could say the kol chamira later, does that mean that, let's say a person was going to work, okay, and they burnt their chametz like at 7 o'clock in the morning, but then they don't want to not be able to eat any of their chametz or anything until later, so they say the kol chamira around 10:30. Wouldn't they still be able to eat during those 3.5 hours?
Yeah, but it's not a good idea. In other words, it's discouraged in halacha. If that's what they want, they sort of have to make a choice. They either have to burn the chametz at 7 in the morning and say kol chamira and deal with the fact that they're not going to have chametz for breakfast. That's one option. Second option is ask someone to burn the chametz for them later in the day, later in the morning. And the person, by the way, is allowed to say kol chamira on their behalf. It's good for them to say kol chamira for themselves also, but the person can't say kol chamira on their behalf. So that would be another option. Third option, by the way, if they're really, really attached and there's nobody they can ask, they could dispose the chametz in a way other than burning it. It's an interesting, I'm not sure offhand which one would be better, but it's definitely not ideal to do the way you laid out in the question. Okay.
Because a lot of places they burn early, right after davening, and I've always thought that you didn't say kol chamira at that time because you were still going to eat chametz.
Mishnah Berurah brings down that it's a good eitzah. The Mishnah Berurah brings down that one of the reasons why we burn chametz, why are we burning chametz Erev Pesach morning anyway? Why don't you burn chametz right after the B'dika? You know, Mishnah Berurah says, so one reason brought down is it's comparable to nosar, which is part of the reason why we burn it. But the other reason Mishnah Berurah says is this way, it's a good built-in reminder for the person to say kol chamira that morning. That's like the whole shot in it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
I hear.
Rabbi,
Yes.
there was a question asked, will a dumpster be available?
Yes, God willing. Thank you. God willing, it'll be available. Best of my knowledge, that's my understanding. By the way, because there's such a close proximity between our garbage pickup and Erev Pesach, I think last year we had like 2 dumpsters or something. I think we're only going to have 1 dumpster this year. So it still means that people from garbage pickup and on Monday should please be responsible about segregating their garbage, chametz versus not chametz. Thank you. Okay, Simi, I'm correct about that, right?
Yes, yes. Can I ask a question?
I don't know. Okay, fine.
When when you burn the chametz and you say kol chamira, does that mean you're not eating any chametz, or you're not eating the chametz that you sold in your house?
Well, let me be clear. What the language of kol chamira, the language of kol chamira that we say when we burn the chametz is different than the language of kol chamira that we say when we do bedika. When we do bedika, we say, listen, maybe there's chametz I didn't notice. That should be nullified. When we burn the chametz, we say, any chametz I've got, I do know it, I don't know it, it all should be nullified. Now, presumably what we're saying is that the chametz that we're selling is not included in that. You know what I mean? But I would strongly discourage if a person says kol chamira and then walks into their kitchen and pulls out a bowl of Wheaties. I think that's really putting the whole kol chamira. I think it's proving that they didn't mean what they were saying a moment ago.
But what about, let's say, if you go to 7-Eleven and you buy something and eat it, that's chametz.
You do it.
Well, I would discourage a person from doing that after having said kol chamira.
Okay.
I don't think it's such a good idea. Now, again, back to the original question, if you said kol chamira and one of your kids or something went to 7-Eleven, that's their business. They didn't say kol chamira. You know what I mean?
That's what I mean. Well, the husband says kol chamira, so what about the rest of the family?
Everybody
Kids.
knows that you and Sammy are like this. Everybody knows that. The truth is, for husband and wife, you really probably should be more like on the same page. I think that would be appropriate. But like guests for Yom Tov, that I think is a different story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rabbi
Okay.
Rosenbaum,
Yes.
I wanted to share a story that some of the old timers might remember from Shomrei. One year, Rabbi Einemer Zatzal was asked whether or not you could display, whether or not you had to put away display dishes, like the question you had earlier. And he told a story about his house, his mother's house, when he was young, that there was a cleaning lady who came Erev Pesach, and she knew that this was a very important Yom Tov to them, a very important celebration. And she knew that the dishes that were in the break front were the most special dishes in the house. So on the Seder table, which was already set for Pesach, she took out the clean dishes that were sitting in the break front and put them out so they should be on this special table. And Rabbi Einemer's point was, he said, that obviously it could not have happened if the dishes weren't in the break front and you could see them. So yes, you can have them displayed. You just need to make sure that your maid knows not to go in there and get them.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. I'll tell you what my takeaway from the story is, Mindy. You should never have your Seder table set so early. That's I'm joking. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's a good story, Mindy. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Wishing everyone a Chag Kosher v'Sameach, and obviously it's a stressful days, weeks, etc. But we should all be zochet to have a wonderful Yom Tov and enjoy it ourselves, enjoy it with the people who we're with, and take care, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Chag Kosher Sameach.
Kosher v'Sameach.